Well, as many of you might have heard, we're going to have a special presentation in a few minutes, hearing from some of our members who are involved in the hurricane relief efforts. But I wanted to have that on this Sunday. It's a special Sunday. It's the last Sunday of the year. And normally, as a way of kind of conserving resources and an opportunity to all be together, we normally do one service instead of two. And I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity for us to just spend a little bit of time in reflection on this last year, in reflection on how God has been at work in our church, but also through our church, impacting those around us. And as I reflect on that, I don't know if you do this, but Megan and I often at the end of a year or the beginning of the next, we'll spend some time, usually an hour, a couple more hours, at a coffee shop, and we'll just lay out all of our goals and dreams and things for the future, but you can't look forward until you look back first. Because truly, you can't know where you're going until you're knowing where you're starting or where you've come from. I don't know if anyone has been on a long road trip or a long hike or a long maybe kayaking trip down the river. And if you don't know where you are in that moment, you can't make a wise decision on where to go next. You just can't. It's a guess at that point. Anyone remember before GPS, the Thomas Guides maps? Anyone? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah? So I'm just old enough to have known about those as a kid when my family and I would go across the United States. But when I came to driving age, we already had MapQuest. And so we would print out the directions from MapQuest like we were, pirates in search of treasure, and print them out. Nowadays, you don't have to print anything if you don't want to. Your phone tells you when you get off course, it says redirecting, and it just helps you find the way. But back in the day, you had to use good old critical thinking skills and an eagle eye to figure out, okay, we're at the bottom of page 42J, and that means we have to flip over to 274F to figure out where we switch over into another state here. Because if you don't know where you are right then, any turn you make could be the wrong turn. And so I think of that for us as well as we are about to cross over from one year into another, for us personally, but for us as a church family, to spend some time looking back at what God has done and where we are currently as a church, so that when we are making our next steps forward as a church into the new year, into the next few years, we're stepping with confidence, knowing, look at where we've come from, look at what God is doing right now, and look where he's leading us right now. There was one time in high school, my friends and I decided to go inner tubing on a river. And we were 16 and 17 and had more confidence than we should have had, and which meant we had less wisdom and discernment than we should have had. And it was a huge rain for 3 days previous to when we were going. And we said, that's okay, we'll still go. Not thinking about the fact that now the river is going to be swollen and kind of like much stronger current and all the things. And so we get in our inner tubes and we go up, we drive up to the one spot on the river. It's, about an hour away from where we lived. And we said, if we get in the river here, we'll meet up with our friends 2 hours later down here. They can jump in and we'll get back home. And we never made it to our friends because between a couple different series of unfortunate events, we all lost our inner tubes. 2 of us almost got pulled under in the river, and one of us went flying down the river about another 3 miles, and the 3 of us left said, we don't know what happened to him. But when we were sitting on the side of that bank of the river, feeling really sorry for ourselves, really scared. We hadn't seen our one friend in about 45 minutes. And we're like, we lost him. We thought for sure we lost him back there. And then all of a sudden he goes floating by. Now in like way out, yards out into the middle of the river. And we see him, we're like, hey! And he waves at us and he tries swimming towards us, but the current just takes him. And in that moment, we knew 2 things. 1, that he was alive, and 2, which direction he was going. And so 2 of us stuck back, and I take off running down the bank in the direction that he was going. And it took me about an hour to catch up with him. And then from there, we did all our big hugs and very excited to see each other, so thankful that God had protected us. And we started the slow walk back to where our friends were. And it's in instances like that, the idea of direction, the idea of being uncertain but seeing God at work, the idea of being able to be part of something way bigger than what we could do on our own. Those are some of the thoughts that come to me when I think about what our church has been through in these last 12 months and what our church family is a part of as we move forward. Sometimes it feels like we're all just holding on because God's up to something. Sometimes it's the slow walk back to where we know we can meet up with others. But, as I think we'll see today, the theme of doing it together and doing it with our eyes fixed on God is going to be something that is actually carrying us into the future. And to kind of frame our time, I want to read for us a scripture. This is from the Gospel of Matthew, towards the end of the book, chapter 25. If you want to use the black seatback Bibles, you can grab it out. It's on page 22 of the New Testament in the black seatback Bible. And the end of Matthew here, this is right before Jesus is betrayed, arrested, and then tortured and crucified. And he's talking to his disciples, kind of giving them instruction, helping them know this is what you will see when you are looking for the kingdom of God. These are the types of things that typify my followers. Don't listen to all the distraction over here, but these are the type of things that keep you close to the heart of God. This is what it looks like to be a part of what my family is doing. And he gives this little picture of what it's going to look like when, he says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and sits on his throne and sits in judgment above the nations and points out who's been following him and who hasn't. And this is what he says. Let's start together in verse 34. He says, "Then the king will say to those at his right hand, 'Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me.' And then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? When was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? When was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?' And the king will answer them, 'Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me.'" This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I wonder how often you've thought of the fact that acts of generosity and kindness towards someone in our vicinity, in the eyes of Jesus, that's as if we're doing it to him. That's as if we are giving that part of our heart and ourself directly to him, taking care of him. When I was growing up, I had heard from some old auntie in one of the churches I was a part of. We all have those old aunties that are giving us advice and encouraging us with scripture. And she said, "You never know when you're welcoming an angel." And she's referring to a couple different spots in scripture when that was a thing. But that's always stuck with me, of trying to treat the people I meet as if they're God himself. And how can I treat you as if you're Jesus? Treat you as if you are the honored guest. And when I don't do that, which happens often, when I get in my own way or I get distracted or my face is less than kind, the tone of voice is more hurried or rash than I intend, don't miss that opportunity, Drew. So I want us to talk a little bit today about some of the ways that I think our church has been involved in caring for those in our vicinity. And so I'm going to invite up Amy Dudley and Denise Steinerbauer to come on up, and they're going to come up here to talk a little bit about the hurricane relief efforts. And as they're coming up, I want to tell you a little bit about some of the other ways that our church has been involved in taking care of people this year. First, I want to share a little bit about the giving tree. That is, go ahead and have a seat. The giving tree that has been a part of our church's rhythm every year for many years, and many of you were a part of that this year. I just want to give you a little bit of a report. This year, we were able to collect gifts for about 15 different people in families in our community, 15 different people. We think that those gifts probably totaled around $1,500 worth of gifts for folks. Gift cards were given to Lutheran Social Services of Illinois, totaling probably close to $1,000 worth of gift cards. Cash donations of over $2,000 was received. And so 3 different families in our area were given some cash donations to help them with Christmas. And so approximately $4,500 was raised through the giving tree to just not come to us, but come right through us to the community. And so I just want to share how incredible that is. In the middle of a busy season, in the middle of when people are doing their own shopping and things like that, to be thinking of others and caring for others and showing them, even just in a small little bit of brightness and generosity, the love of Jesus. I want to share with you also, earlier we heard one of our missionary partners is in South America. The organization is called Amazon Salt and Light. And it's a family that the husband is a pilot and helps use his piloting skills to bring people and supplies up and down the Amazon basin, up and down the Amazon River network there to these very remote areas that, it's 3 days by boat to get to any of these villages. And with the people and the supplies, he also is able to bring the love of Jesus. And members of our church had been a part of, for this past a little over a year, of building a new plane for them. And the reason was because we could buy a plane for about $1.25 million. And we waited around for a while to see if someone would win the lottery. And when that didn't happen, some members said, well, what if we just built it? And we were able to build a plane. Members of our community were involved in sourcing the parts, sewing on the nylon, soldering up the joints and the electrical work and stuff like that. We built it for about 20% of that cost. And then we were able to dismantle it again and send it down, and it got there this last month to now resource a whole new network of the Amazon basin as well. The work of God happening through our church. And then another group that I want to tell you about before we get to the hurricane relief efforts is our quilting group. Many of you know that our quilting group, quilting and sewing group, meets every Wednesday from 9 to noon, and they get together every single week, pretty much rain or shine, to share the love they have for quilting, crafting, sewing, to share stories about their lives and their kids and their grandkids, to share some sweet treats. But it's not just a social group. This is a mission group because all the things that they put together and create are either donated or sold to fund missions. And let me tell you a little bit this year. This year, 2024, our quilting group, it averages about 14 ladies a week. They made 187 large quilts, 66 lap robes, 18 baby quilts, totaling 271 items that were given away and donated for people in need. Several quilts were given to the Whiteside County Health Department. Some were given to the Christmas families for the Giving Tree. Some were given to Lutheran Social Services. Some were given to local dialysis as Christmas gifts for their patients. And others were given to homebound communion members, and some were even sent to the Carolinas with the hurricane relief funds. But this is a cool thing I want to tell you about this group that I just learned for the first time this year. I knew that every year our quilting group donates quilts to our hospice here in town. And it's given to the family of the family member who's on hospice. And sometimes the loved ones, after their loved one passed away, the family members will sometimes keep that quilt as a memento, a memory of this was a quilt that was prayed over and brought a little bit of comfort in the last days of our loved one. And what I didn't know this is that our quilting group here in New Life has a commitment to give every patient family a quilt at the Rock River Hospice and Home. And they try to make patriotic red, white, and blue or military insignia ones for the veterans that are in hospice. But this year, they donated 141 quilts to hospice. Total given to hospice since this began in 2017 is 945 quilts, plus 24 Afghans and 22 prayer shawls during COVID, totaling 991. All the quilts have a message of Jesus loves you. And let me tell you, it's going to be so exciting in 2025, in just a month or two probably, when we cross that 1,000 mark, to be able to celebrate God's work through our church. But this group is also involved in our fall craft show called the Handmade Market. And it was our 10th annual one just this last October. And they sell baked goods as well as sell some of the quilts as fundraisers to fund missions and projects throughout the year. They sold over 40 quilts, numerous Afghans, hats, and scarves, plus more to bring in around $3,000. And then any money that comes into that group, half goes to charity, right out the doors, and half stays in our church for church projects, whether it's a couple years ago buying appliances for the kitchen, or a couple years after that buying the white tables and chairs that we use for functions and things, or most recently the new blinds that are in the atrium area come from those type of fundraising activities of that group. But this year, that group was able to send $5,000 right out the doors to different charities, Home of Hope, the Food Bank, Gianna's House, Exceptional Care. They sent money to support a Samaritan's Purse hurricane relief right before being involved in our second hurricane relief project, and sending cash donations that way as well. And it's just an incredible thing. It's an incredible thing for me to think about and hear, because as I reflect on what God has done in our church this year, and then I'm going to ask some questions to you guys. Sorry for making you sit up here. Early in the fall, I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks after Hurricane Helene, there was an employee of one of our church members who drove truck and said, "I'm going to go down to the Carolinas and bring some stuff if anyone wants to help." And so our Joyous Java bar put together some money, a couple $100 to help pay for gas. And word got out. And so other people said, "Well, I want to help. And pretty soon there was close to $5,000 raised for that first trip. Hey, let's just help this happen. And it was about 2 weeks after that, that Amy Dudley came to me and said that her and her husband, Chris, were going to be heading down there for a family function anyways. And they'd love to fill up their truck with stuff. Do you think the church would want to send some stuff in our truck? And I said, I don't know. That's kind of short notice. We got 6 days. Let me send an email. And by the end of that day, an email had been sent. Multiple people had already responded, I want to bring stuff. The quilting group had decided to donate $5,000 to the trip. And by the end of the week, we had so much stuff that it filled the trailer to the fact that your truck couldn't actually take it. Chris, your husband, is homesick today, watching online. Hi, Chris. And this is what he texted me this morning. I just want to share this with you guys. Chris said that one of the things that stood out to him the most was he had not been very involved in the planning. And so when he showed up the day of to load, he was stunned to see how full the trailer was on Wednesday night. And of course, as it turned out, they had to take off 3,000 pounds, 1.5 tons, off the trailer just so that your truck could make it happen. And that's when Denise came up to Amy and said, Amy, I know you're really anxious to get on the road. You're not leaving tonight, and that's okay. Amy, tell me a little bit about what that was like with you, getting just involved from the beginning of, it's already on, the microphone is on. So just tell me, what was it like that made you want to get involved, and then seeing the initial prep happen?
Well, my family, my parents and my sister and brother-in-law all live down there just west of Asheville, about 15 minutes out of the city. So when we heard the hurricane was coming through, obviously we were concerned, and my mom was saying, she's like a Weather Channel nut, so she knew that it was going to be a significant storm. And then I heard nothing from my family for 2 days. And so, I think it was a Thursday night. I can't remember the days of the week, but it was 2 days later when I finally was able to get a text message in and get some text messages out from them. So that was a little nerve-wracking. And, excuse me. So just finding out over the next few days and week just how devastating it was. They didn't even know those first few days how bad it was, because they thankfully live on a ridge, and though they experienced the wind and the rain, they were wonderfully and graciously protected. But they knew many people that were not so lucky. So as I knew my daughter was getting married on in that mid-October, and I knew I was going down. My dad was having knee surgery, so I told my sister I would come and stay a week and help her out. And it just occurred to me about a week before, I was like, well, we got this pickup truck. Certainly we could put some stuff in the back of the truck if anybody wants to throw something in. And I had told my family if there was anything that they normally would get that they could not get a hold of, because obviously the stores were bare. There weren't, that Ingles is their main grocery store down there, and their storehouse in Swannanoa had been completely flooded and devastated. So they were not able to even restock their stores. So I came into quilting that Wednesday morning because I had been enjoying working with the ladies, and they have been very welcoming since we moved here. And I just mentioned to them that I was going down, and if anybody wanted to, we'd fill the back of the truck, and that'd be awesome. Saw Drew, mentioned to him, and he's like, this is awesome. I'll get an email out. The next day, Denise calls me, and she's like, hey, I hear you're going down. I'd like to help. What can I do? And I was like, I'm not quite sure, but let's just see what happens. Well, next thing I knew, she had contacted multiple farmers, multiple organizations, multiple people, and stuff just starts rolling in. And by Sunday, I'm like, we're going to need a trailer. Because there's just no way that, it's going to fit in the back of our pickup truck. So she went to work on that. And next thing you know, someone donated a trailer for us to be able to pull. So it was so humbling to watch this community just step up and be the church.
Yeah.
Be the body of Christ.
Yeah, I want to show some pictures while we're talking about this, because as you said, people just started showing up, and let's show the first set of pictures if you wouldn't mind. These are pictures from all the different times that we are gathering things here in our community, 2 different sets of times. But as you said, Amy, you and your husband Chris just moved here. How long have you been coming to our church? How long have you been in the Sterling area?
We moved here late March. My husband he is the tennis and racket sports director at Westwood. And so we moved here. He started in April. And we were kind of wondering, wanted to find a church, but weren't quite sure what would fit. And I noticed, as I've told Pastor Drew, every time I drove up and down Lynn here, I noticed there was always cars here. There was something going on all the time. And I could literally feel life coming from this church. And I don't know, you can tell from my accent, I'm from the South, where on every other street corner it's a Baptist church. Well, up here, every other street corner has a Lutheran church. So, and my husband was raised Lutheran. I was raised Southern Baptist. But it was interesting to me as I looked around and I just watched the different churches around this one. I could feel life coming from it. And my husband wanted to sort of reconnect with his roots. And I'm like, sounds great. I didn't have a problem with that. So we came, and the first Sunday we came, Pastor Drew and Eric both met us, out there and greeted us, and literally spent time just connecting, talking one-on-one. And it was just, I don't know, it just drew us in. And then the more we connected and discovered different, when I connected with the ladies on Wednesdays, excuse me, I was just blown away at the amount of being the church y'all are, and not just doing church. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. I want to move to Denise and Joe now. Tell me a little bit, Denise. Amy gave you a little bit of an intro of how you got involved. When you think of, when you were hearing of this stuff kind of starting up, what comes to mind when you think of God at work through everyday people? Does that make sense? Because to me, that's a big theme of how this all started, where it's kind of just God doing a bunch of stuff and we were along for the ride. So tell me about your experience with kind of that first shipment, and then what led you to be a part of that second shipment.
Well, first off, I have to thank Amy and Chris for, introducing the idea of doing this. And, I wanted to help. I didn't have any clue that it was going to go this far. I didn't realize how many people would be willing to step up and help and donate and volunteer. And the night that we loaded that trailer, it was devastating and it was overwhelming and it was a beautiful thing. Anyways, the members of this church has really stepped up and has done what God has intended for them to do, and it has reached out to the community in different ways. And we just received so many donations, and it was a very good feeling. So after Amy and Chris left, I'm like, why couldn't we do that? We have a daughter that lives in North Carolina and a daughter that lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and both of them were not in any harm's way. They had a little bit of flooding in backyards, but we were going down to visit them as well, so we decided we were going to try to run something together, not even thinking that it would be anything like Amy's, and it blossomed just leaps and bounds.
Yeah, so the first time that we started gathering some supplies, we had about 6 days notice, and filled a trailer bigger than it could be filled. Had to send 3,000 pounds with a trip going down from Rainer that they were sending a truck as well, and that was an incredible thing. And then about a month after that, there was a decision to say, let's do another trip. And this time got to open up the invite to the whole community. Got a couple other churches involved, got a couple other organizations involved. And Joe or Denise, talk to me a little bit about that second trip. Maybe Joe, what made you think that we should do it again? And what got you kind of excited about being involved?
What got me excited about being involved here was the momentum that started several weeks before, and when I'm at work or I'm dealing with customers, other businesses in the community, and they hear about what this church is doing, they get excited to be a part of that. And I had multiple businesses and people in those businesses that heard about what we did and found out about this third trip, and me just going to them and saying, hey, this is what we would like to do. It's just amazing the grace and the giving that they did. And I received multiple pallets of things that went down there, and I stored them in my warehouse for 3 weeks until we finally got the silver trailer that you see on the screen. And that was another business that I had contacted and say, hey, I'm looking for a trailer, and these are my parameters. And within 3 days, they found a trailer that was custom built that another customer out in Indiana didn't take. And I said, I'll take it. And they went and got it. They went and got it for us.
Yeah.
And so like I say, the water, the generators, the mounds and mounds of clothing and blankets and finances, cash donations that were given to this is just phenomenal. And you find out that the feeling that you get to give is it's just beyond comparison to anything. The feeling of giving, and I felt that when we went down there, we were a messenger of this church and of this community. And there's big thank yous that went out to the teen life group that packaged and filled the trucks and filled the trailers, and the children of the school that put together all the backpacks. It's we just don't understand the impact that those backpacks gave the children down there that literally had everything washed away. They had absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So
I want to talk a little bit about what you all experienced driving down there. And I want to show some pictures about the actual trip down there as well while we're talking about this. But maybe, Joe, can you just describe, what did you see? What did you see when you're driving down there? What did you see when you got to interact with some of the folks?
Like this one here, this is when we first entered the mountains Tuesday morning, driving to Spruce Pines, and the amount of devastation that the sheer force of the water literally tore up trees, buildings, and just everything everywhere was just scattered.
And this was 6-8 weeks after the hurricane. It's
6
still
to 8
everywhere.
weeks after, yes. And then, the people, like this person here, his name is Lee. This person was up in the mountains, and he lived up in a apartment. And when he heard the hurricane coming through and he could hear the snapping of the trees, he went to his truck, which had a tree limb fall on it and damaged the truck. But he went 8 miles down the mountain, and the next morning after the storm was over, drove back, and the building that he had been living in was totally gone. And that person, he was at the relief center, and all he had left was his damaged pickup truck. He slept in his damaged pickup truck, and the clothes that he had was given to him by the relief center. But still, he donated his time, and we were there weeks and weeks after, and he was still there. And he had sent me a text just telling us what a messenger of God that we are to him and to that community. And, he said, I'll probably never see you again in this lifetime, but I sure hope to see you in the next. So.
Beautiful. Thank you. Amy, can you talk a little bit about when you and Chris went down as well? What are some of the things that you experienced? You guys were there about a month after the hurricane, and you got to hook up with a Baptist group there in the Carolinas. And so tell me a little bit about what you experienced when you went down there and got to see the relief efforts happening.
So my sister actually works for Biltmore Church, which is in Ardens, just south of Asheville. And so I had connected with her, and they had a pretty massive relief effort going on, a place where they had jumped into action. Like it was stunning what I saw when we got there. There were literally, it was a place for dropping off donations, but it was also a place where people could go and get things that they needed. So we pulled into, let me back up a little bit. As we're entering the Asheville city limits and area, and I began to see areas that I knew, and been going down there for 30 years since my family has been there. And we're driving along the French Broad River, and I'm seeing, just the devastation right along the river where the waters rose roughly 40 feet above their normal. I'm driving along, and it's, I know I'm going to see some devastation. I just, but it's still the way it hits you in the gut, especially when it's an area And I'm driving at this point, and I've got 7,000 pounds behind my truck. And I just looked at Chris with tears streaming down my face. And I could literally feel the grief and the hopelessness that just sort of overwhelmed me. It was as if I could feel the land and the community crying. And that kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't quite expecting that. I knew I would experience some things, but to just feel that as you get into the area. So we get down to the church, and we pulled into this parking lot, and it was unlike anything I had seen. There were semis, trailers parked everywhere. There was about 5 or 6 forklift trucks just beeping and moving all over the place. And she had us pull into one area and greeted us. And there was a group of 6 trucks, just like ours, trucks and trailers, that had just arrived from Maine, had done the same thing, basically put out the word and said, hey, we're going down. So they were getting unloaded right about that time. So we had to wait a little bit. And at this point, they were literally so overwhelmed by the outpouring around the United States that they were only accepting donations from people they knew. They literally could no longer handle the stuff coming in from people they didn't know. So so my sister kind of gave us a little, like, here's what's going on here. There was a refrigeration truck, and she took us to the back where the Baptist Missions, like, emergency relief kind of organization had set up an entire food, like, they were there cooking and prepping for volunteers to make sure volunteers were not putting any weight on the community and were being fed, but they were also helping to feed those in need who needed to be fed. And one of the things that I thought was so amazing in this community, especially with the farmers, and Denise is contacting them, was the outpouring of food. We literally took down a whole lot of perishable food items that we had to prepare some in the kitchen to be able to transport so that it didn't go bad by the time we got there. And we were able to offload, pounds and pounds of chickens, frozen chickens and vegetables and different things that we were able to donate then to the Baptist Missions. And they were so excited. They were like, we are going to use this and add this into our menus, because so much stuff that goes down is non-perishable. And for some reason on my heart, the Lord was like, I want you to take perishable stuff. And I'm like, okay. And thanks to those who donated coolers. And I remember getting there and I'm like, I have to have these coolers back. You cannot lose these coolers. And so anyway, we pulled up and they unloaded. You can see some of the pictures there of the crew that unloaded the trailer. And one of the ladies that was the sort of their warehouse manager at this point had just lost her entire business, had been washed away down the river. And so when they needed volunteers at the church, she stepped up and basically they put her in charge of the whole warehouse. And so she was running as, we unloaded things. She's immediately like, okay, grab this pallet. Y'all put everything on, like all the toilet paper here, all the paper towels there. And she just had them going. It was just like, I'm just like jaw on the floor going, I cannot get over the amount of organization this community for itself, those in the community that didn't lose everything working so, and some who did lose everything working so hard. But as my sister drove, we followed her. We had to go drop the trailer off at where she lives, because then we had to go immediately to Blairsville, Georgia, to my daughter's wedding. So all this happened which is one of the reasons I really wanted to leave Wednesday night, was because I knew I needed to get there. My daughter's wedding, I had so much going on. So this was a piece that got added in to an already very hectic week and weekend. What was the original question?
I think you answered it, yeah.
The
things you saw there. I want to share,
Yes.
Chris had texted me, your husband Chris texted me some of his reactions, and this will kind of transition for our closing questions. And so one of the things that Chris had seen upon arriving at the Biltmore Baptist Church main campus, he was absolutely astounded by the sheer size and scope of the operation. And Chris says he momentarily thought that our contribution, a trailer with 7,000 pounds of stuff on it, was such a tiny drop in an enormous ocean. But then he remembered hearing that there had been a young child who had insisted on donating $4 to the effort. And then he remembered that there's no such thing as an insignificant donation. And now I understand there's no such thing as insignificant giving when it comes to the church. And so I want to,
Along the lines of that
oh, please.
as well. My brother-in-law, excuse me, who works in Swannanoa, which is one of the hardest hit areas, texted me this morning. He has coworkers that literally lost everything. He said, just to let y'all know, your church had a great impact on people here. 3 in particular that lost everything were blessed by everyone there. Please let them know that they all thank everyone at your church, and we're very blessed by your giving. We love all of you. So a lot of the cash that the quilting ladies went to buy a generator for an older couple, as well as cash donations to my brother-in-law's coworker whose father watched his house go down the river, as well as his own home that was completely devastated. So
Yeah. Yeah. Denise, I want to turn to you for kind of a closing comment here. What stands out to you about the power of unity, the power of obedience to Jesus' call when you think of this?
That's a tough one. The unity is whenever there's like devastation, it's always goodness that comes together. Everybody pulls together. And we have a life group called Better Together, and it really is a true statement. We are better together. And the other part of the question.
Yeah, cool. Well, you had told me that you felt maybe a little not suited even to come up and speak today because it wasn't about you individually.
No.
It was about everyone working together.
Yeah.
So how did you see God work through many?
Well, just all the different things that people did. I mean, we had people that packed, we had people that loaded, we had people unload, we had people that gave money, we had people that gave generators and water, and even if they couldn't give anything financially or items, the prayers were huge, very huge. We had a good, safe trip down there. We met some amazing people, 3 in particular, and I just want to real quick say, we met this Lee. He was one that lost his home, and we were able to give him money. There was another, a mom and a little girl that was helping at a donation relief site. She lost her home, and she'd been staying with the grandparents, and we were able to give her some money. And this young lady, Missy Lou, who has got my heart, she opened up a barn that she turned this into a huge donation drop. And we didn't know the magnitude of all of this, but once we got the truck totally unloaded, she was saying how she lost her home and she's living in a trailer that she parked behind her barn. We were able to give her money as well. So that doesn't go unnoticed to these people. They cried. They were so grateful. And I'm going to do this again. So I'm hoping at some point here in the future that, we can do something like this. Maybe not exactly like this, but
Yeah.
they need help for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun, is what
Yeah.
Amy said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe, final word. What encouragement or challenge would you give us as we continue to follow Jesus, serve others? What encouragement or challenge would you give?
The challenge I would give to this congregation and this community is look at the overabundance that has been given to you, and I'm going to say even to myself, the blessings that I've been given through the years between family, this church, the people of this church, friends. I can't take it with me. I got to have the memories, and my thoughts now are, how do I give back? How do I give back to my church, my community, give back to others? I've been blessed many times over, and I've seen my daughters who are down in that area and how they give to those type of things and what they've seen. My one daughter in particular works for a company that is a nationwide company that does restoration, and they were at this facility called the Biltmore, and with their company just, scooping out mud and stuff like that, and that's really what, when my family member first told me about that, and then I had learned about this from these two, that's kind of where it first touched my heart and got my enthusiasm going. And I would encourage everybody to, look at your relationship with Jesus, and what would Jesus do? When you see a need, what would Jesus do?
Yeah, one of our core values as a church is that we're trying to be radically generous. We're learning how to be radically generous, and it's because of what we've been given already that we're able to give. Jesus says that it is more blessed to give than to receive. It just is. It's fun. And we then get to be a part of something even bigger that God is doing. So I just want to thank the three of you for coming up here and sharing with us. I want to thank all of you who participated in any of the things we've mentioned today. I want to thank all of you who are committed regularly to giving to this church, to serving here at this church. It means that we all get to be a part of something bigger than just ourselves. We get to be a part of what God is doing in our community. And along the way, we're getting transformed as well. We're becoming more and more like Jesus, growing in the fruit of the Spirit. And so I just want to thank you. Can we give a thank you to Joe and Denise and Amy and Chris online?